Christina, thank you so much for joining me today. To kick us off, I would love to hear more about some of your early career.
Okay. First of all, I'll set the preface, like, I love talking to other people. I hate talking about myself. So this is me, an incredibly uncomfortable hour, but I'll do my best for you. My early career was, I was a psychology major. I thought I was going to be some form of therapist, and realized about halfway into my degree that I probably wasn't meant to do that for a living. And my dad, who was a serial entrepreneur in Boston, had suggested there's this thing called human resources, and it's sort of the intersection of psychology and business, and that might be what you would be interested in. And I got myself a little job at a startup in Cambridge before Kendall Square was Kendall Square. And it went public about 3 weeks into my internship. And I was a completely naive 20-year-old. And I thought, oh my gosh, if you get smart people working together with a great idea, the company is successful, everybody makes a lot of money, business succeeds, like that sounds awesome. That's what I would like to do for a living, because it's that easy, right? But that's ironically exactly what I went after. So when I graduated, I actually looked for startups, ended up at it wasn't a startup, but it was a hyper growth consulting firm, and was amazing. It was way ahead of its time in terms of, there was a really good balance of men and women at the top. There was a transgender person. This is 1990. Like, there was stuff going on at that company that I had no clue was special or unique. I just took it for granted. This was my first work experience, so I assumed that's what work was supposed to be like. And the most important piece for me was, not only did I realize that for a young person who literally had zero skills other than a new shiny college degree, to be in a startup environment allows you to change your job description from this to this if you have a great attitude and high aptitude, right? Because there's so much work that needs to be done. If you raise your hand and say, I'll help, usually people are saying, great, come on board. So that was great for me. But the other piece was, I was super inquisitive, and I felt like I was in a safe space. You call it human resources. Like, my printer's a resource. Why, if we're going to scale a company, why would we think of people that way? And telling me to go shut up and go file, they know explore that. So so done a couple different rotations through HR pieces in the and I switched over to the consulting part of the company so I could learn how to do it from the clients.
Things are cutting in and out for me a little bit, Christina. I'm not sure if it's happening for others as well.
How's that? Did we lose you?
I'm still here.
Everything I just said, you lost me.
So I think what I gathered from the in and out piece is that, you started at that startup where there was a variety of folks in leadership positions, and you didn't realize that wasn't, the norm, and then later transitioned into the consulting part of the firm.
Yep. Yeah. And then I cold called my way into Sapient, which was a very small company at the time. And candidly, I think it worked because we were a bunch of 20-somethings running a company. Like, none of us knew what we were doing. We just had a lot of heart. We were at the right place at the right time. And we were able to build something pretty spectacular. And I think working with a bunch of like hard charging, like-minded people in terms of like anything is possible was an amazing environment for me to like. There was, you knew you didn't have the right answers, so you would work together to try out a bunch of stuff, and you learned resiliency about making things work and stick, and built a lot of confidence about how to figure it out from there.
Awesome. And so after Sapient, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And the step that took you, from, you talked about an internship and then getting into HR, like, where was the jump from you, doing X job to actually getting that chief people officer title?
Yeah, well, so I have a really, like, my story is not normal at all, right? I went from internship at 20 to chief
Uh-huh.
people officer, I think, what, before I was 30, and
Wow.
now I'm 52. So I've been doing it for a really long time, but it didn't really exist then, right? So I think, you know, I went into Sapient not as the chief people officer. I got promoted into it, but like I didn't really have that sort of mid-level. I skipped the mid-levels. I went from grunt to leader really quickly, and that's not normal, right? Now, oddly, I think in today's world, there's a lot of young people that want to go from here to here in 2 years, and I've worked with those people and whatever. Um, I like, I wouldn't recommend, I got really lucky. I was at the right place, the right time, but it's not a normal path. And it also shouldn't be the expected path, I think, because I think to be good at this job, you actually don't just need work experience to know what it's like to work through all these different challenges. So you have things to pull from to help you be good at it. You also need some life experience to learn how to be empathetic with people about what they're going through and all of that. Just, you just need some at bats, and to think that you know how to do that after 2 years of, you know, managing performance appraisals, like that's just not going to get you there. So I think experience, I might have been playing this role for way too long, but I'd like to think that I've gotten better at it with each passing job.
This, you're like resonating so much with me right now, Christina, just because my own journey, I went from, you know, operating as a senior recruiter at Cengage to joining a startup. And within 6 weeks, they were like, hey, do you want to just be our head of people? And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I just started managing people 6 weeks ago, and now you want me to be an executive? So I can definitely concur that while making the jump to that level is you know, certainly a fast track to growth, that I learned very quickly that there was so much I didn't know.
Well, it's so much you didn't know, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I mean, I think one of the reasons that, one of the things I'm asked often, and it drives me nuts, but it's like, how do I get a seat at the table? And like, okay, no one's going to ever invite you to the table. You earn a place at the table, right? And I think that that if you don't have the experience or the confidence, that you might have the seat, you might be invited to be an executive, but if you don't have the confidence or the voice or the perspective to share, you're not going to be a valued member at that table. So
Totally.
you know, I think you want to set yourself up for success too. And I think sometimes our egos can be in play, and like, oh, I got the title. Well, great. But if you're not going to maximize it or add value with it,
Then
you're
why have it?
setting it backwards, right?
Totally. I'd love to hear more about a day in the life as a chief people officer. Now, I imagine that your day-to-day life now at Rapid7 is probably very different from those early days as a CPO at Sapient. What all
Sure.
does it entail?
You know, there's one common thread that's been the same for years, and then everything's different, right? I was just on a working session with Hack Diversity this morning, and I was in a breakout group with another person who plays my role. We couldn't, so a day in the life of a chief people officer, I can tell you about my day in the life. It's really different from person to person because our companies are so different. And what I am responsible for is not particularly normal for a chief people officer, because I own some non-traditional things. So for example, every day is different. Yes, it's totally different in the world of COVID, but I'll just pretend like that doesn't exist for a second. I spend probably 30% of my time just in meetings, like just the crap you have to do, candidly, like, you know, whether it's planning, forecasting, exec team, whatever, meetings, team meetings. I spend a ton of time in one-on-ones, not just with my team, but with the executive team. I sort of, you know, am a coach to them. I spend time with my own team and, you know, constantly having conversations with them. And I try to block out at least 1 or 2 conversations a day with random people in my company. And I will talk literally to anyone in the company. So there's sort of wide open access. And the reason I do that is like, we could survey, we could do whatever, but nothing replaces human connection, especially in times like these.
Totally.
And understanding what's on the mind of a new software engineer is really different than some mid-level sales manager or an exec or whatever. And we've found, especially in times like these, that we're all dealing with something, as you so eloquently said it, like whether you have a dog or a spouse or a, you know, whatever is going on. This is such a neutralizing time, right? We're all dealing with something, and yet we're all having to interact with each other over camera, et cetera. And finding the commonalities, I spend a lot of time trying to tease out what we have in common rather than focus on the differences. Because we really embrace the diversity and the differences, but you know, at the core of it, we're all human beings. We're all dealing with stuff. So I think the biggest difference between my life today and how I was doing it at Sapient is that I've had so many at-bats right now to sort of figure out what makes sense. I'm way more empathetic than I was back then. I think I truly value like everybody's perspective. I feel like I can learn something from everybody. So I'm definitely like a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thinker. And I've also learned how to prioritize, right? I mean, I used to just say yes to everything. That is a recipe for disaster.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So I've figured out like, what is the most impactful thing? I start every morning saying like, what am I going to do today that is going to add the most impact to the organization? And then usually 90% of the crap on my list is like stuff. It's not super impactful. So I focus on that, and that keeps me moving.
Nice. Many of the articles that you've written for Venture Fizz have really influenced how I view people strategy. So I'm so excited to learn more. Where do you draw your inspiration from? Do you have any like people ops idols? Where do you look for innovation in the people space?
Do I
Other
have
than inward, obvious.
Do I have idols? No, I don't. But I don't really idolize anybody, and that sounds awful. I just like, we're all like people, right? So I mean, there's people I think are super interesting, but I tend to lean more on. I think of myself as more of a business thinker first, people second, and I tend to spend a lot more time listening to what's on the mind of the CEO than I do what's on the mind of the people leader, and then I work backwards, because for me, like, I've never, not since my first job, have I ever thought of myself as human resources. I hate that word. No offense to anyone who carries that in their title, but like, human beings to me are not resources. They're the lifeblood of the company. So for me, when we came up with people strategy, God knows how many years ago, it was the notion that here's the business strategy, what's on the mind of the CEO, or where are we going as a business? And then it's my job to create the people strategy that will allow that to actually happen. So I look at the business first and what the CEO is thinking about. And then my job is to make it as humane and motivational to our humans as possible.
Awesome. Yeah. At Cozykin, my last startup, my CEO and co-founder really strongly recommended that I read some books that they came across as a part of the Harvard MBA program. And one that really just resonated with me was from a former founder. Well, he might still be a founder. Well, he's still a founder, obviously, but he might not still be the CEO.
Sure.
Ben Horowitz, Hard Thing About Hard Things. And so, yeah, he has definitely kind of influenced and changed my way of thinking as a leader as well.
Yeah, I mean, I take inspiration from the most random things and people, and it's not to suggest there's not great people leaders. Boston has a bunch of them that are fantastic. Totally. But I think that I care more about like, what are we trying to accomplish as a business, as leaders, and then how do you make it? I think our secret sauce is then how do you turn it into something that like resonates with people and they all want to move the boat in the same direction, and that. So I think that's sort of how I've approached it. Exactly. but I tend to look at audacious. Like I like big picture, audacious thinkers. Like I've always been a fan of like Steve Jobs and Richard Branson was my first like business crush, I think, just because I like people that you know will put a very bold stake in the ground and then try to work towards it.
Definitely. I don't want to pivot too far from our intended conversation, but on that note, that kind of makes me think of Patty McCord, former chief talent officer over at Netflix. I saw her speak at, this is going to sound real nerdy, something called CompCon. So compensation conference
Yep.
that started a couple of years ago here in Boston from Quincy-based startup Pay Factors, if I'm not mistaken. But she talked about how she does not believe at all in PIPs, performance improvement plans, for those who are on the call and don't know that abbreviation. And that just really like threw me for a loop. I'm curious, what's your thought, yay or nay on PIPs? Do you agree with Patty's like?
Yeah, I mean, I think Patty McCord's brilliant, but I agree. I don't know if it's been a while since I've listened to her point of view on that, but I think like I've never called them PIP. I've never had them. What we do have, and I do believe in, is get well plans. And what I mean by that is if you're not performing, sometimes it's just, it might not be because you suck. It might be because like I'm a crappy manager and we haven't connected on what's really going wrong. I have to believe that you actually have the capability of getting well if we can really outline what the end goal is, right? So if we can sit down and say like, hey, Christina, you're struggling. Let's outline like what amazing would look like, and let's get on the same page with that. And if you sign up, I promise I'm going to help you get there. But like, let's agree to what the problem is. And if we can align on that and put it down on paper, so it's very clear to both of us, we know what we're signing up for. If you're in, I'm in. And then we'll work towards it. If it doesn't work, then, then we'll deal with that then. But like, we're making a commitment to try to actually assume you are going to be successful at the end of this. If we don't honestly, in good faith, feel like we can say, I'm going to help you get well, then we just part ways, and we'll do that as humanely as possible. But I will never put somebody on a get well plan unless I actually think there is a chance that they can come out the other end. And we've had people that we've done that with that are thriving in the company now. So that's my unique take on it.
Thanks for sharing. On more of a lighthearted topic, I'd love to hear, what do you love most about being a chief people officer?
There's like, it's never done, right? I love solving problems. I love somebody. I've been at Rapid7 almost 10 years. For anybody that might be on this call that knows me, I've been trying to quit for 5 years, right? And it's not because the company's not amazing. I love my CEO. I love my team. I work at an amazing company. But when I joined, my MO has been to go in, be the first people person, get it to an event like an IPO, and then jettison out and go do it again. That's the only way, like, because I've been playing this role for so long, my only mark of whether or not I'm any good at this has been to go see if I can rinse and repeat it and do it somewhere else, because that's, a lot of people haven't done that. So that was my measure marker in my own head. And true to form, we filed to go public in 2015 and I gave my notice. And our CEO, who is like one of my best friends, an amazing human being, convinced me to stay. I'm really glad that I did. And I will say 2020, by far my favorite year at this company. Now,
interesting.
Why do you say that? That is a dumpster fire of a year.
We've got shirts on the market over here in Harvard that say 2020 sucks.
Yeah, I hate that people are sick, but I think I am, I'm clearly an optimistic, glass half full kind of person. And for somebody who has been at this company for so long, it has completely challenged the way that I do my job. I have spent a career building companies around unique workplaces, like physical workplaces and culture. And that involves being together. And, if I came up with an idea, I might go ping you in the hall and be like, Allison, let's go whiteboard this out. That's how I've known how to do this. All bets off. Like, you got to completely reinvent how you do that. And how do you take a bunch of people that are going through something together and turn it into a win? And I love it as a problem to solve. So I think I'm just super inspired right now. I love what I'm doing right now. So that's what I like about it. I also think that it's probably like, I think a lot of women sometimes are like, this is a heavily woman dominated field, right? There's definitely men in it. It's great, but it's a heavily woman dominated. I think for whatever reason, for so long, women have felt like, you know, the insecurity of how do I get that seat, or I want a voice or whatever. I have never felt like that. I have always been surrounded by guys, and now things are the playing field's normalizing a little bit and there's more women. But I was always the one woman in a room full of men who usually would look at, like literally my first day on the job at Stake, we had started this little cybersecurity company in 2000. And one of the men on the executive team that I started with, who I didn't know previously, was like, I don't understand why you're here. What you do is total bullshit, pardon my language. And I don't think it's valued. Like, I don't think we need it. And instead of being like gutted by that, I thought my mission now is to show this guy how valuable it is. And long story short, he actually spoke at our Rapid 7 conference a couple of years ago. And I hadn't seen him in a long time. And he pulled me aside and he's like, I'm really sorry. Like, I literally had no idea the value that what you did or what you brought. And that's not to pat myself on the back. It's just, I look into those opportunities. It's an opportunity. And I look at the world really differently. And that's my competitive advantage. It's not that I'm a woman in the room. It's that I have a different point of view, and that's going to add value to this situation. And I have surrounded myself with men who actually support that thinking rather than too many guys like the one I just shared.
I love that. And I know we started to kind of touch on some of the challenges of 2020. And I will say, I think it was maybe the Resources for Humans conference that Lattice put on last year that I heard you speak, where it was some virtual conference where you said your office is the physical manifestation of your culture. And I used that catchphrase. I used that catchphrase to rally our company to move offices from this like tiny corner of a work bar in Central Square to an office at South Station. And then 3 weeks later, we lost funding and I had to let go of everyone anyways. But ultimately, that was a huge challenge in my own career as a head of people. What has been one of your biggest challenges?
One of my biggest challenges in like what context? Because I face like 100 of them a day. So I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess any that really sticks out to you. I know personally that one for me, like I like to think of myself as a pretty resilient leader for the most part, but going from being employee 25 and hiring up to 200 people in less than a year and then promptly having to laying them all off was really gut-wrenching for me. So have you ever had a gut-wrenching moment in your career as a people leader?
Probably, but I don't think about it that way. I just look at it as like an opportunity to everything's an opportunity to me. You know, the most recent one that comes to mind is we've been doing a lot of diversity and inclusion work over the last couple of years. And for those unfamiliar with our company, where our CEO happens to be a Black man. I might be the only person in America who can say my last two CEOs have been Black men. Like it's never occurred to me that that's like a unique thing. Apparently that's a unique thing. And when the world imploded several months ago, and I don't mean COVID, I mean more the George Floyd murders and all of that going on, it was a really tough moment for, you know, I would suggest anybody with a soul in this country. Yeah. But I think that it was really hard because we were already dealing with a pandemic and trying to work through that. And I felt like we were finally in a good place as a company, and we were like stabilizing and all of that. And then all of a sudden that occurred. And it was like, oh my gosh, I've got a number of people that are processing this. We're not together. Usually when things that are not good happen, we're doing it together, and we're all doing it separately right now. And I've got a CEO who I, you know, cherish, who's dealing with like, he should be at the front of this right now because of who he is and because of his unique place in the world. And yet he's trying to process this on his own before he can go address the company with it. And just trying to navigate that, and if I'm just being really candid, he basically, we had town halls, we're doing town halls every week at this point. And he would have, we would have assumed that he would have addressed the company on this topic at that next town hall.
Mhm.
And he tapped out and just said, I can't do it. And at the time I was like, if I'm being really honest, like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, you're going to leave the white chick having this conversation with an entire company about this situation. And yet then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what he's thinking. Like it was so about like, how am I going to do this versus
How is he feeling?
how is he managing through this, and how can I best support him in that moment? That was like a real, for somebody who like kind of prides themselves on the empathy and caring so much about this work. That was a moment. It was a difficult moment to get through. And, and candidly, here we are right back again with last night and Breonna Taylor. And it's nonstop. So, I mean, that for me is the hard stuff, right?
Totally. Yeah. Couldn't even avoid the eye roll on that one. So
I know I don't want to get political, but
yeah, no, I feel you. To pivot away from this a little bit, going back to the journey piece, obviously you made that quick jump to the CPO title. But other than the obvious years of experience factor, how would you distinguish a director or a VP of people candidate from someone who is ready for a chief people officer?
All right. So here's the thing. There's not a lot of chief people officers out there, right? And every company, at least every company that I've seen, and my experience is like growth companies in Boston. So it's like super narrow field, right? But I'm not talking about giant pharma companies, or like, I can't speak to Amazon or Google or any of that, but in my sort of demographic, every CEO wants to find a true chief people officer. And what I mean by that is somebody who understands the humanity of the business and can drive and partner together with the leadership team. There goes my dog.
Knew it was gonna happen.
With the leadership team to truly help, drive that portion of the business. And no one knows how to do that, right? No CEO like really gets it. I think the one I work with happens to probably get it more than most that I've seen, but it's becoming a huge topic for them to even care or think about. It used to be like some piece of curriculum they had in business school, and now it's like, oh my gosh, that's the missing piece I have to my business model. How do I think about it? So everyone's scurrying to try to find a chief people officer right now. So there's a lot of roles available to anyone who's listening who wants to find this. The good news is there's very few people that actually have that experience. So they're getting really creative, right? What I always advise them not to do is don't go take that like young, energetic 23-year-old who like is great at planning parties and, talks about culture in terms of like, we have ping pong tables and I can host a great virtual trivia night. Like, that is not culture. That is not going to add value to your company. I don't discount it, all awesome stuff, but that's not a chief people officer, right? But what they are willing to do is look for people that come from different types of backgrounds, like customer success, for example, somebody who really understands the minds of the customer and how do you connect and think differently, and whatever, sales helps. You got to be able to sell your ideas. So I think there's a lot of traditional entrees into this world now, which is great if you haven't come up through the thing. The one other thing that I would advise, though, if you want to go up the path, is like, don't focus on promotions, focus on making an impact to the business, like truly adding value and impact to the business. And the other piece is cast a wide net, like really get broad experience so you understand how the different pieces of the business work and you can empathize, even within HR. Like, I worry because I have folks in my team that are like, they've been in TA their entire career. They've been in total rewards their entire career. And then they say, like, I want to be a chief people officer. Well, you have no idea how any of these other pieces work in that space.
Yeah.
So to broaden yourself out, even to work on projects, even if you don't go from like manager of total rewards to like, then you're going to go be a recruiter, to build those cross-functional partnerships, or to get involved and raise your hand and get involved in different types of projects around the company and things, will only, that will increase your value, that will increase your understanding and your impact. And it will definitely greaten your chances of being on a better path towards that role.
Well, the one benefit of, being at a startup, being Startup Boston Week, is that we have to wear a lot of hats for those of us who do people ops in the startup world. So it's nice to have that upbringing, if you will, towards that pathway. And I love what you said about, looking at customer success or sales folks for these roles too. I won't say who, but I was informally mentoring one of the moderators for another panel this week, and they had shared with me how they felt at their current startup. They weren't getting the influence from the people leaders there, and that person was the lowest on the totem pole in terms of the people HR function. And I said, okay, well, are they based in your office? Because it's pre-COVID times, of course. And they said, no, we really only have a VP of customer success here and our CMO. And I said, oh, you're golden then. Your employees are your customers. So see what you can. Go take that VP of customer success out for a coffee. Talk to your CMO about like what you can do to influence your employer brand and, get your employees and candidates excited about being here in the Boston office. And so hopefully that person, took that advice, but I think there's so many opportunities for inspiration that we can draw from.
I totally agree. I mean, I think there's a couple other pieces though. Like, you really got to understand the business. You really got to find your voice and your unique point of view, and you got to figure out what's authentic. I feel like I'm swearing a lot. I'm trying not to, but somebody bought me something that, like you said, physical manifestation of your culture. Somebody else just gave me something that I didn't even realize I said, but it was fuck best practices, and I apologize. But I really mean it, which is like, I think sometimes everyone wants a playbook, and it's like, well, what's the best practice on this? I don't want to follow somebody's best practice. I want to be the best practice. And that's not because I'm overly competitive. It's just what's going to work best for our company. And it might not be what works great for like Beth Israel. Like, they could have something brilliant, but it may not be appropriate or right for us. So I think that you can pull and learn from lots of different people, and that I love, but it's really figuring out and having the conviction to do what you think is the right thing, and be willing to test and sort of lean on those entrepreneurial skills of like constant iteration and innovation, and what works today may not work in 2 years, and being willing to constantly break it and try something new and get feedback and not take it personally. And anybody who comes into this work and says, it drives me crazy, but like, I don't think I've interviewed a person under the age of 30 in the last 30 years when you say, why do you want to do this work? And they say, because I like people. If you like you will, that is like, I like people too. But if that's your inspiration for wanting to play this work, you're in the wrong field. Because, by the time I shut my computer down at night, I would argue I probably hate 80% of the world.
I won't tell the plural of mooses.
No. I mean, I love human beings, and I love what makes them tick. But the point is, like, this is really, really hard work, right? It's not just that it's like never ending. It's that sometimes we don't always see, we're dealing with the messy stuff. We don't always get to see, yes, we get to celebrate people's promotions and raises and all of those good things, but we are also in the midst of people dealing with challenges and not understanding and lack of self-awareness of why things aren't happening, and having to have like the really hard conversations that their managers aren't capable of having, and creating that safe space. And that is hard work. So I think, you got to have, I mean, I think it's probably like a little bit of a calling, right? To like really want to do this and really want to dig in. And it's not for the faint of heart, but it's awesome.
Patience
If you
required.
like it,
Sure.
like it's awesome. I love what I do.
Awesome. I gotta admit, I forgot that I had pre-wired some polls as we talked about.
I talk about.
As we kind of just talked a little bit about, some of the cross functionality and the different pathways to Chief People Officer. I'm gonna put a poll out to the audience here. I'd love to see who is on this call. Are we mostly People Ops folks? Do we have a blend? All right. And Christina, can you see the results, or do I have to end it before you can see?
I just see like a list of buttons.
Oh, okay. Well, you got to vote for People Ops.
Oh. Not People Ops. Won't even let me vote. Host and panel let me vote.
Oh, all right. Womp womp. All right. So it looks like we've got about 65% on the call are, from people teams, and then followed by other after that with some founders, and then operations folks with a smattering of sales, marketing, finance after that. Very cool. All right. So we'll end that. And kind of on the next note here, what words of encouragement do you have to, people strategy, HR, whatever the title has given them, those professionals who are interested in becoming a Chief People Officer someday?
Allison, come on. What words of inspiration? I don't know. Like, really inspire you. I don't know. I mean, I think I've had a really, really fortunate career, right? It's not lost on me. Like, I got to do a lot of stuff at a young age that I probably had no business doing or whatever. But I think the thing that has allowed me to have the career that I've had is a couple. Number one, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about my career. I spend a lot of time worrying about adding impact, and that has allowed me to have a great career. I haven't spent a lot of time trying to follow what others are doing. I've tried to figure out what I think the right path is, because when I was coming up through this, there just weren't a lot of examples of what I thought what value might look like. And I was, had the very good fortune when I should have known better, but like in my 20s where I was working with CEOs that were like, go figure it out. And like, what an amazing opportunity. I mean, like it is not lost on me that most people don't get to do that. And for a lot of HR people, they're still working for CFOs. I would never work for a CFO, and no disrespect to CFOs. They're amazing. And I love the one we have, but I would never work for them, just because I think the CEO is looking at this completely differently than a cost center. And, just this thing you got to do, right? Like this is like a critical part of the business.
Yep.
And that's what and I held out for what I was looking for, right? Like, I'm not going to just take a job because it's going to get me some experience. I'm going to work with people I feel like I can learn from, are going to listen to me. And then I'm going to take every opportunity and every at bat to try to make an impact. And I think that's what allowed me to do it. The other piece is I sort of found a niche for myself in that, every company I've ever gone into, like the CEO thinks they know what's broken, right? And they're like, okay, the first thing you need to do is like build a talent acquisition team, or we have a lot of junior managers that have gotten promoted up and they have no idea how to manage. Okay, yes, and yes. There's probably 7,000 things wrong with this company at 25 employees. We'll figure that out. What you got to do before you can do any of that is figure out who you are. So before culture was a thing, and I don't think I referred to it as culture when I was getting my career started, but I figured out, like, if you can't articulate what your culture is and who you are and what you value as an organization, everything else you do will never stick, right? It might be good at the moment, but like, it's got to have something rooted. And I look at our core values and our culture as the foundation to the rest of the house that we're building. And you've got it, like, so once we had that identified, then you are able to pull, like, how do you promote? Well, it ties back to that. You're not just promoting somebody because they've been around for 5 years. You're promoting them because not only are they really good at their job, but they're actually embodying our core values and what we believe in. So we like having that foundation and having that framework and approach to how we do this. Like, I don't ever look at it, I have a playbook, but like I've got a couple of rough blueprints that have been applicable at every company. And then you got to figure out what makes sense for that company. But starting with culture first and understanding the who you are has been like pivotal to everything, I think, for me.
Totally. I don't remember when exactly it was, maybe like 2017 or 2018 when I was in the middle of a job search. I remember going to the careers page on Rapid7's website, and you guys had what I will best describe as like a personality quiz of some sort at the time to see.
The predictive index?
No, it wasn't predictive index. It was like before you even applied for a job to see if you could embody the core values of Rapid7. I just thought that was so unique.
Yeah.
To get like a different sort of candidate experience involved. I was like, whoa, what is this company about?
I think, you know, the figuring out who you are is like, it's also being comfortable with the fact you're not for everybody, right? It's almost like, I always use weird dating analogies for work, but like, you know, you could be a great catch. That doesn't mean you're a great catch for everybody, and you can't take it personally, right? I think our company is amazing, but it's not amazing if you're somebody who likes like to be micromanaged or like a ton of structure, or you like knowing exactly what every single day is going to look like and you want to work 9 to 5 and whatever. Like, that's a certain work type that really resonates with lots of people. And you would hate working at my company, right? And vice versa. Like, I won't mention any companies by name, but I have talked to friends that work in other places, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would be fired from a bank in about 30 seconds. I'm pretty sure. And that's okay. Like, we don't have to be one size fits all. It's just being really honest about who you are, and then inviting people to understand that, and making that choice for themselves as well. And I think if there's a mutual fit, boy, does that work. That works well.
100%. Anytime before I go to deliver an offer to a candidate, of course, I debrief with the hiring panel or interview panel and the hiring manager. But I also make sure that I hop on a quick call with the candidate, because a job search is such a two-way street that if I'm not having that debrief with them to kind of gauge their interest, like I have to make sure that they're also invested in the opportunity and seeing themselves in our culture in that role.
100%.
I will shift over now, but oh, you know what? Okay. Before we shift over to the audience Q&A, I am going to launch this poll here, number 2, so we can see, having heard all of this, do you, as an attendee of this event, now want to become a chief people officer someday? I'm very, very curious. My answer is still yes.
I might have said
but like, I'm already kind of like in the function, just without the chief part. All right. Trending in the right direction, Christina. Well, I will also amend that to say this direction doesn't have to be right for you.
No, it doesn't.
So
it doesn't at all.
If it is your calling, that's awesome. If not, then, you know, there are definitely plenty of people who do want to bear the heartache and also the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be really candid. I've had a number of people on my team say, and I think they're being very honest, they're aspirational, they want to continue to progress and grow in their lives, and they are very clear saying, I would never want your job. Right?
Yep, totally. I'll share the results here. So a pretty, you know, undecided room here. We've got, you know, some probably nots, some maybes, some yeses. So very, very interesting. So thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts on that. I'm gonna kick over to the Slido link now. If you have input some questions in the Zoom chat, unfortunately, I won't be looking at those, so pop them into the Slido link, as Pardees has been hinting at throughout. And so we'll go kind of top to bottom on the ones that have been upvoted. So someone asked, Christina, what is your relationship with the CEO. Can you give an example of a situation between the two of you when one of you had to disagree and commit?
We don't, we've had one massive disagreement in 10 years. He's arguably one of my best friends. I mean, I would walk through fire for this man. I just think he's an exceptional human being and an incredible leader. And he's so committed to the work that we do on the people side of things. Like I used to share an office with him pre-COVID. We literally sat like 6 inches away from each other. So that's how, like, that's not normal for people in this role to like be that connected to their CEO. But I think we realize we're sort of like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. I would be the dumb one in that analogy. But I mean, we're really in it together. And the one disagreement we had was just about something he felt really passionate about, somebody's opportunity, and I disagreed, and so did some other folks on our leadership team. And his response, instead of just being mad, was all right, then you guys go figure it out. And he gave us the space to go come up with a better solution, which we did. But I mean, I feel really fortunate that I work with a guy where we probably talk 20 times a day and connect a lot. So there's very few, it's more discussions, it's not disagreements.
The question with the most upvotes now, I think we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, is how can someone make a career pivot into the path of a chief people officer? I think really that goes back to, looking to the inspiration from
Sure.
whether it be a growth department through sales or marketing or customer success.
I would say a couple things. Number one, like raise your hand and get involved in some kind of people-focused project. So I would, if you have, somebody in senior leadership in your company that you can talk to, whether it's the CEO or somebody else, to just say like, I would love to get more exposure to that. Can you help me? If you go through the people team, sometimes they'll like, no, don't touch our stuff. But I think if you're talking to the business folks and saying like, I would love to be involved in helping think that through or whatever, you just start to get some experience. Volunteer outside of your company and see if you can find experience and knowledge there. And startups are the way to go. Like if you can afford the risk, 1,000%, like you will have opportunity to get involved in a lot more than if you're trying to do this in a big established company and pivot.
Totally.
So if you go in where it just doesn't exist. I know so many people that have gone in, like I have a friend who was the chief people officer at a startup in Boston, and she was the head of customer success there, and they just needed people help. She just had incredibly strong instincts and was very comfortable working with the leadership team and whatever. And they pivoted her into that role, and she's been really successful. I will say this too, though, like be prepared to work. Like no one's going to hand you anything, right? And to be able to kind of just dig in and get experience. Like I know so many people are like, I read this book. Like a book's not going to get you there. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to get in there and meet people and talk to people and get, work on some projects, build your story, figure out what your story is, so that if somebody says like, hey, could you do this? Yeah, here's why I think I could do this, and practice that story, and fill in the blanks. You'll get there.
Totally. Another question that we have here is, many of us start in specialized HR areas and need to branch out to become a CPO. In your opinion, which area or areas of HR are the most important to get experience and to, get that promotion into CPO?
I don't know. I mean, I think I just opened the little chat, and I'm like so stressed out at how many chats are here that I wasn't paying attention to. You feel free to stick my email address in here too, if you like. And if anyone wants to follow up, I'm happy to. But I think I just saw the bottom one says like the HR business partner role. Definitely, like if you really want to understand the inner workings of like the human dynamics and the sort of the daily care and feeding of people, like that above all else, I think is really critical to have some grounding in. I also think if you can do a little bit of time in talent acquisition, Just like I think sales is really valuable, even if you do a tiny stint in it at some point in your career, learning how to sell an idea, influence others is just really basic, great skill set for anyone to have. And talent acquisition is the sales of human beings, right? So very similar. But I think understanding how to forecast and how to keep up with the pace of the business and hire and strategize, like TA, I think, and business partners are the two places that I think are the must have. Candidly, like I know enough about total rewards or like comp and benefits to hold my own, but like that was never an area that I've always surrounded myself with people with deep expertise, because I will never know enough about it to add value. And the people that are great at it are exceptional. But it's, you know, it's not probably the most strategic place that you should spend your time focusing.
And then next we had, could you please share with us a bit more about your people organization? What teams report to you? How many people? Is it in one location? I know you kind of touched on earlier how you oversee some things that aren't traditional for a people team.
Yeah, we do have some weird untraditional things. So we have talent acquisition, which is kind of the lion's share of the team, right? We're growing pretty quickly. We've added, I think, 150, 200 people since COVID started. So like we're still hiring a lot. And that's based out of Boston, but we have recruiters in Boston and in Belfast, which is our second largest office. And they cover the globe. We do very little outside retained or agency hires. We built the talent within our team. We just think they understand our culture way better. And it's cost savings. We have people strategists. So the whole organization is called People Strategy, but people strategists with a VP of people strategy. And then she's got some directors and then business partners effectively that are dealing with the daily stuff, and talent and development is in that group as well. We've got total rewards, which includes comp and benefits. And that's also split between Boston and Belfast and covers the globe. And our HRIS system fits in there as well. A small team though. And then we have workplace experience, which is basically the real estate in our space and the physical manifestation of our culture, which is also includes our office managers. And we have like, I don't know, 8 to 10 of those at this point. So they add to the number, but they are such a huge piece culturally of like executing our vision for that. What else am I missing? And then I own some like weird stuff. So owning the workplace experience is kind of unique. Usually that falls within finance. We have a rotation program that we started a couple of years ago that helps create opportunities for young people coming right out of college. And we've done a really unique, it's not just go through the rotation. We've added a huge element of community service to that and cross-functional collaboration and stuff. So I own that as well. And then I spend the majority of my time, that's all what my team is doing. And I'm primarily focused on diversity and inclusion and culture. Scaling our culture is where I spend most of my time.
Wow, that's a whole lot.
It is, but I love it. And then we are hiring for a vice president of change management for the first time, which I'm really excited about. So there's 2 of us, myself and our head of people strategy, do a lot of that work, but I think we're at the place now where we really need somebody strong to lead that function.
Awesome. I'll close it out with one last question here that I also can relate to in terms of curiosity. So our HR org is reporting into a cost-conscious CFO, which limits our impact. What advice do you have to help us highlight our strategic value?
It's really hard for me to not flippantly say, like, that might be really hard to do. So I think that the question is, I would love for the senior most person in your team to go to your CFO and say, what can we do to show you how much value we can add? Or like, give me your key priorities in the company and let us figure out how we can add significant value to those. And just do it. And then it becomes a little bit hard to argue with, right? But I'd be trying to sell the CEO, not the CFO. on the strategic value, because I think oftentimes the CFOs will just go to the bottom line as opposed to the true impact of the work that you can do. And again, that's to take nothing away from the CFO. It's just that's their job. But I think if you really want to add strategic value, you're having a different conversation.
As somebody who currently reports to a CFO, I will also say that in your job search process, if you are coming into that, make sure you ask who this role is ultimately rolling up to influence that job search process and that two-way street of your search too. And if it is rolling up to the CFO, seeing if that person thinks of people as a competitive advantage
Right.
was helpful.
And there are some, I don't mean to like be black and white about it. Like all
Yeah.
CEOs are great and all CFOs are horrible. There's some phenomenal CFOs who really
I'm very grateful to our CFO, Ted.
Yeah, it's just not that I'm speaking in general terms. So I think it's just really understand what you're getting into. Nothing, if you're very junior in your career, like just getting some wins under your belt and getting some experience, you might have to suck it up and deal with, whatever. But the more you're progressing through, if you're going to really try to be a chief people officer and really make the impact in the company, those become really, really important things to hold out for in terms of being able to make the impact.
Awesome. Well, we are at the hour. Thank you so much, Christina. I know that I've taken away so much from this discussion with you. Hopefully our attendees have as well.